You probably still remember the exact tone someone used when they said you were overreacting. Not just the words. The room, the pause, the strange look on their face, and what happened inside you. Sensitive people do that. They remember moments other people call small because those moments never felt small in the first place. They landed somewhere deep. And once something touches that depth, it rarely leaves quietly. That is why a random sentence from years ago can still visit you at midnight. That is why certain songs feel dangerous. That is why you can walk into a familiar place and suddenly feel 14 again. People often think sensitive people remember more because they are dramatic or too emotional. But that is not what is happening. A sensitive person is usually noticing more while the moment is still unfolding. They catch the shift in energy before anyone says a word. They hear the hesitation hidden inside a casual sentence. They feel when laughter has a sharp edge. They notice when affection suddenly feels conditional. They track tiny emotional changes the way some people track weather. And the brain tends to store whatever feels important for survival. So if your nervous system learned that tone, distance, silence, or rejection could hurt you, it paid attention. Not halfway. Completely. That kind of attention becomes memory. Not neat memory. Not simple memory. Living memory. Memory with body heat. Memory that stays in your chest, your stomach, your jaw, and your sleep. Sometimes you remember a moment and your body reacts before your mind catches up. Your shoulders tense. Your stomach drops. Your breathing changes. You feel something old before you can name it. That is because sensitive people often do not just remember events. They remember what those events meant. They remember how confusing it felt to be misunderstood when they were trying so hard. They remember the loneliness of saying nothing because saying something felt too risky. They remember being called difficult when they were actually overwhelmed. They remember learning that honesty could cost connection. And once the brain links emotion with consequence, it does not forget easily, especially when that emotion showed up early. A lot of sensitive people grew up in environments where emotional signals mattered more than words. Maybe nobody screamed. Maybe everything looked fine from the outside. But inside the house, you learned how to read tension like a second language. You learned what footsteps meant. You learned what silence meant. You learned when a parent was physically present but emotionally unavailable. You learned when affection had conditions attached to it. You learned when your feelings made other people uncomfortable. That kind of childhood does something subtle. It teaches you that details matter because details protect you. So you start noticing everything. The longer pause before disappointment. The smile that does not reach the eyes. The text message that feels technically kind but emotionally cold. The joke that carries a little humiliation inside it. The change in someone's voice after you finally share something real. Other people forget those moments because they pass through them lightly. Sensitive people do not pass through lightly. They absorb. And absorption has a cost. One cost is exhaustion. Another is memory. Because when you absorb a moment fully, it leaves a stronger imprint. That is why you can remember a conversation almost word for word. That is why you replay things nobody else even noticed happened. That is why your mind sometimes acts like an archive nobody asked for. It can feel unfair. You want to let things go. You want to stop mentally reopening scenes that already ended. You want the past to stay where it belongs. But your mind is not trying to punish you. It is trying to protect you by keeping old maps. It remembers pain so you can avoid walking into it again. It remembers embarrassment so you can avoid exposure. It remembers subtle rejection so you can prepare for distance early. The problem is that protection can become overprotection. And overprotection turns memory into hypervigilance. Now you are not just remembering what happened. You are scanning for signs it might happen again. In conversation, you notice when someone replies a little too fast. Then you wonder if they are irritated. You notice when a friend seems slightly distracted. Then your mind quietly asks whether you matter less today. You notice when your partner says nothing is wrong a second too quickly. Then you spend an hour reading the air. At work, someone gives brief feedback and you feel it for days. Not because you are weak, because your mind keeps replaying tone, timing, facial expression, and what was unsaid. In social settings, you remember who interrupted you. You remember who made eye contact. You remember who changed after learning something vulnerable about you. You remember which version of yourself people seem to prefer. That last one stays with sensitive people for years, because many sensitive people become experts at self-editing. They learn to soften themselves to stay connected. They become less honest, less spontaneous, less visible, and more acceptable. Then one day they realize they can remember exactly when that started. Usually it was not one giant moment. Usually it was a pattern. A laugh when they were sincere. A dismissal when they were hurt. A blank stare when they shared something meaningful. A parent who loved them but could not hold their emotions safely. A classroom where being different made them an easy target. A friendship where their depth got mistaken for neediness. So they adapted. They became observant, careful, interesting, helpful, easy to talk to, hard to truly know. And because they were always watching, they became excellent at remembering. Not only facts, emotional facts. The kind nobody writes down but the body stores anyway. Who felt safe, who felt unpredictable, who made you shrink without ever raising their voice, who only loved the polished version of you, who saw your sadness as inconvenience instead of information, who made you feel calmer without doing anything dramatic at all. Sensitive people remember those things because emotional memory is practical. It teaches them where closeness is nourishing and where closeness is expensive. Still, this gift can become heavy, because remembering everything means carrying too many versions of people at once. The version who comforted you, the version who embarrassed you, the version who promised something beautiful, the version who disappeared when it actually mattered. Sensitive people often struggle because all those versions stay alive inside them simultaneously. So moving on is rarely simple. It is not just losing a person. It is losing the hope attached to certain memories while still carrying the painful ones. That creates a strange kind of grief. Even after the relationship ends, the nervous system keeps collecting evidence. You remember the restaurant, the exact text, the expression on their face before they pulled away emotionally, the quiet moment when you knew something had changed, even if they denied it. And here is the part people rarely say out loud. Sensitive people are often told they need to stop caring so much. But caring is not the real issue. The real issue is having nowhere safe to place what they feel. When there is no safe place, memory becomes storage. It holds what was never processed. It keeps what was never witnessed. It preserves what was minimized. That is why some memories stay sharp for years. Not because they were dramatic, because they were lonely. Pain becomes heavier when you had to carry it alone. A dismissive comment hurts more when nobody later says that was unfair. An embarrassing moment lasts longer when nobody helps you recover your dignity. A breakup lingers differently when you still blame yourself for needing too much. A childhood wound hardens when everyone acts like nothing really happened. Sensitive people do not always remember more because they are attached to suffering. Sometimes they remember more because closure never arrived. The moment ended, but the understanding never did. So the mind keeps circling. It keeps reviewing the footage. It keeps asking what that look meant. It keeps trying to solve emotional mysteries that probably shaped your entire personality. That is why sensitivity often comes with deep thinking. Your mind is not shallow enough to skim over contradiction. If somebody says they love you but consistently you anxious, you notice. If somebody praises your kindness but only appears when they need something, you notice. If a family member says they care but never really sees you, you notice. And once you notice, forgetting becomes difficult. Because forgetting would require betraying your own perception. Sensitive people struggle with that. They have spent too much of life being told their perception was wrong. So when they finally trust what they feel, they hold on to it tightly. Even when it hurts. Especially when it hurts. Because pain is often where the truth first appeared. Not the whole truth, but enough of it. Enough to explain why certain people drain you without obvious reason. Enough to explain why some rooms make you feel instantly small. Enough to explain why being liked has never felt the same as being understood. And maybe that is the deepest part of this. Sensitive people do not just remember details. They remember emotional reality. They remember who they had to become around certain people. They remember how much energy it took to stay acceptable. They remember when they were joking on the outside and disappearing inside. They remember smiling while feeling unseen. They remember giving grace to people who never learned their inner world. That memory can become painful, but it can also become clarifying. Because over time, you start noticing patterns in what your mind refuses to forget. It is usually not random. The memories that stay are often pointing toward unfinished truths. Truths about what hurt you. Truths about what shaped you. Truths about what you needed and never received clearly. Truths about how often you abandon yourself to preserve peace. This is where sensitivity becomes more than a burden. It becomes information. Not all of it is pleasant. Not all of it is poetic, but is honest. An honest memory can slowly lead you back to yourself. It can show you which environments taught your body to brace. It can show you which relationships trained you to over-explain. It can show you where your softness turned into self-protection. It can show you why rest feels unfamiliar after years of emotional scanning. It can even show you what real safety might look like now. Because real safety feels different from intensity. It does not make you decode every pause. It does not force you to earn calm. It does not punish your emotions for existing. It does not make your body prepare for impact during ordinary conversations. When sensitive people meet genuine safety, something surprising happens. Their memory starts changing shape, not disappearing, softening. It becomes less like an alarm and more like wisdom. You still remember what happened, but it no longer owns your pulse. You still know who hurt you, but their voice stops sounding louder than your own. You still carry the past, but now you carry it with context instead of confusion. That matters more than people realize, because the goal is not to erase memory. The goal is to stop reliving it as if it is still happening. That takes time. It takes better boundaries. It takes honest self-trust. It takes noticing when your mind is reviewing old pain for protection, not clarity. It takes learning that remembering everything does not mean everything deserves continued access to you. That is a hard lesson for sensitive people. They are often loyal far beyond the point of mutual care. They keep emotional receipts not to attack people, but to make sense of them. They revisit old moments trying to find one explanation that finally makes everything fit. But sometimes, the explanation is simple. Some people were careless with your heart because they did not know how to hold one. Some people could only meet the version of you that required nothing. Some people loved your depth until it asked for depth in return. Some people were not evil. They were just emotionally limited. And your memory kept trying to turn limitation into meaning. That is why being sensitive can feel both beautiful and brutal. You notice magic others miss. But you also notice fractures others ignore. You remember tenderness vividly. You also remember disappointment in high definition. You feel the difference between being tolerated and being cherished. You feel the difference between attention and attunement. You feel the difference between someone hearing your words and someone actually receiving you. That sensitivity is not fake. It is not attention-seeking. It is not weakness wearing fancy language. It is a nervous system that learned to notice what matters before anyone explained why. Sometimes that came from beauty. Often it came from pain. Usually it came from both. So if you remember everything, there may be a reason deeper than overthinking. Maybe your mind has been trying to protect the parts of you nobody protected properly. Maybe your memory became a witness when nobody else was. Maybe those details stayed because they were the only proof your experience was real. And maybe that is why forgetting has always felt strangely impossible. Because some part of you believes that if you stop remembering, you disappear too. But you do not disappear when you loosen your grip on the past. You become easier to hear. You become easier to trust. You become less crowded by old voices. And slowly, the memories that once felt like chains begin to feel like signals. Not commands. Not life sentences. Signals. They tell you what overwhelms you. They tell you what nourishes you. They tell you where your heart has been stretching itself beyond safety. They tell you where you are loyal to pain, because pain felt familiar. And once you understand that, remembering everything starts to feel less like a curse. It starts to feel like a language. A painful one sometimes. A beautiful one too. A language your soul learned early, when attention was how you survived. So no, sensitive people do not remember everything because they are broken. They remember because they were present in places where presence cost them something. They remember because their inner world records what the outer world dismisses. They remember because their heart was paying attention when everyone else stayed half asleep. And if that has been your life, there is nothing weak about you. You were never too much for feeling deeply. You were carrying more truth than most people know how to name. That is why you remember. And maybe, finally, that is also why you deserve gentleness from yourself.